Once upon a time, in a small town nestled deep within the forest, there was an old abandoned mansion on the outskirts of town. The locals had long since given up trying to maintain it, as no one had lived there for years. It was said to be cursed, haunted by the ghosts of those who once called it home. Many brave souls had attempted to explore its depths, but all had returned with tales of terror and fear. One day, a group of teenagers decided to dare each other to spend the night inside the infamous mansion. They were determined to prove everyone wrong and show that they were not afraid of the supernatural. As they entered the dark and creaky doors, they knew they made a grave mistake. From that moment on, their lives would never be the same again. In the darkness, they could hear faint whispers and footsteps echoing through the halls. Suddenly, a door slammed shut behind them, leaving them trapped. Panic set in as they searched frantically for a way out. But every exit seemed to lead back to where they started. The only light came from flickering candles on the mantelpiece, casting eerie shadows across the room. Out of nowhere, a ghostly figure appeared before them, causing them to scream in terror. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of their terrifying ordeal. Their only comfort came from each other's presence until a sudden loud bang shook the entire building. Terrified, they ran towards the sound, only to find themselves face to face with something truly terrifying. A demonic figure stood before them, eyes blazing red with malice. It spoke in a language they didn't understand, but its intentions were clear: to send them straight to hell. They tried everything to escape, even attempting to break down doors and windows, but nothing worked. Trapped inside, they were at the mercy of whatever evil lurked within these walls. As night fell, they could feel the temperature drop and hear strange noises coming from somewhere deep within the house. Then, without warning, the lights went out, plunging them into complete darkness. In their panic, they grabbed onto one another for support as they stumbled through the darkened halls. The only thing that kept them going was the hope that someone would come and rescue them. But as time passed, it became increasingly clear that they were completely alone. They had been trapped in this hellish prison for days when they finally heard a faint creaking sound coming from above. Terrified, they cautiously made their way upstairs to investigate, only to find themselves face to face with something truly terrifying. An old woman stood before them, dressed in tattered clothing and sporting an eerie grin. She spoke not a word, but instead pointed to a door on the other side of the room. Without hesitation, she motioned for them to go through it. The teenagers exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to trust the mysterious old woman. Her grin was unsettling, and her eyes, dark and hollow, seemed to hold a secret they weren't sure they wanted to uncover. Yet, with no other options and desperation clawing at their sanity, they followed her unspoken command. Slowly, they approached the door she had pointed to, their footsteps echoing through the silent mansion like the beating of a heart. As one of the boys, Daniel, reached out to turn the knob, the old woman disappeared, vanishing into thin air like smoke in the wind. A chill ran through them, but they pressed on, pushing the heavy door open. What lay beyond was not an escape, but a strange, dimly lit chamber that looked nothing like the rest of the decaying mansion. The room was circular, with ancient symbols etched into the stone walls, glowing faintly with a pulsating blue light. In the center stood a massive, stone altar, draped in tattered, blood-stained cloth. On the altar lay a book, its pages open and glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. As the teenagers cautiously approached, they realized it was the source of all the strange happenings. The air in the room was thick with an unnatural presence, and the closer they got, the more oppressive it became. Words written in a language none of them recognized filled the pages, their twisted letters seeming to writhe like living things. Suddenly, a voice, low and guttural, filled the room, echoing off the stone walls. It spoke in the same demonic language the figure downstairs had used, and though they couldn't understand the words, they knew that it was a warning. I think we need to leave. Now, whispered Emily, her voice trembling. But as she turned to leave, the door they had come through slammed shut, sealing them inside the chamber. Fear gripped them tighter. One of the girls, Sarah, stepped forward, her eyes drawn to the book as though it were calling her. "Wait," she said softly. "Maybe this is the key. Maybe if we figure out what this book says, we can break whatever curse this place has." But as her fingers brushed the pages, the book flared with light, and the room shook violently. The symbols on the walls blazed brighter, and an eerie chant filled the air. Daniel tried to pull her away, but it was too late. The book began to float, hovering above the altar, and Sarah's body went rigid, her eyes wide with terror as she stood transfixed by the glowing words. "Sarah!" the others screamed, but she didn't respond. The light around her grew brighter, and then, with a deafening crack, the room was plunged into chaos. The walls began to close in, and the floor beneath their feet started to crumble, revealing an abyss below. Dark figures emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing like embers, and their twisted forms reached out with clawed hands. In the midst of the chaos, the old woman reappeared, her grin now a sneer of triumph. "You were warned," she hissed, her voice no longer the gentle rasp it had been, but something far more sinister. "This house is a prison for the souls who seek to challenge its curse. You are not the first, and you will not be the last." "Please," Daniel begged, "let us go." The old woman tilted her head, her eyes gleaming with malice. "There is no escape. Not unless—" "Unless what?" Emily cried, her voice cracking with fear. The woman's grin widened. "Unless you offer a sacrifice." The room fell deathly silent, the meaning of her words sinking in. Someone would have to be left behind, a soul for a soul. The teenagers looked at each other in horror, but there was no time to argue. The ground beneath them was splitting apart, and the creatures were getting closer. In a moment of sheer desperation, Sarah, who had been freed from the book's trance, stepped forward. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady despite the terror in her eyes. "I'll stay." "No!" Emily cried, but Sarah shook her head, a sad smile on her face. "There's no other way. You have to go. Live for me. Please." The old woman cackled, pleased with the decision. With a wave of her hand, the door behind them swung open, revealing the darkened hallway they had come from. "Go," she said. "But remember, the curse never truly lifts." With tears in their eyes, the remaining teenagers fled, their footsteps echoing down the hall as they left Sarah behind. As they burst through the front doors of the mansion, the oppressive air lifted, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, they were free. But as they looked back at the mansion, its dark silhouette looming against the night sky, they knew that what had happened inside would haunt them forever. Sarah's sacrifice had saved them, but at what cost? And though they escaped, the whispers from the mansion followed them into their dreams. Reminder that in this land of magic, some doors, once opened, could never be closed.